Welcome to Feminist Founders, a podcast that explores how to create a more equitable world through entrepreneurship. I'm your host, coach and journalist Becky Mollenkamp. Feminist Founders is a listener-funded podcast. Your contributions enable me to continue bringing you these important conversations without corporate advertising. To support the mission, head to feministfounderspodcast.com and sign up for a paid subscription. The link is in the show notes. Now, on to today's show. I am going to be introducing you to Rachel Formaro, who is a client and also a dear friend. I have the inside scoop, can see her business from the inside, and can tell you with certainty that she is really walking the talk when it comes to running a business that leads with your values, especially values around equity. And I am so excited to get to share that with you because Rachel's amazing and such a really good human. So I hope you have fun getting to know Rachel, who is the founder and CEO of Blue Pagoda. She has 25 years of career experience, and she is a top performing communications and business management professional. Her company is in financial services area. She also has experience with technology and consumer goods. She's worked with Fortune 500 companies around their business challenges. She has worked both in the US and Canada. She's from Canada, as you will hear in this. She also is a mom, a wife, a cook, a reader, and does a lot of volunteering work with, especially with where she's a board member, the Chrysalis Foundation for Women and Girls in Des Moines, Iowa, which we talk about. I think you're going to love this conversation. I think you will feel really inspired by what Rachel's doing and also get an understanding of what that evolution has looked like. It doesn't have to happen overnight. Before we get started, though, please take just a few seconds to learn about another incredible podcast.
Welcome to the Scenic Route Podcast, the weekly podcast for smart, heartfelt entrepreneurs who don't buy into the generic online biz circus anymore and are ready to build a business around their desired lifestyle. I'm your host, Jennifer Walter, rebranding expert and sociologist, and I'm all for giving you the tools and insights you really need to build a life and business on your own terms. Every Tuesday, I release a brand new episode bringing you creative business ideas, insightful mindset advice, and candid stories from the lived experience of people who are thriving on the scenic business route. And for more of the Scenic Route, head to scenicroutepodcast.com for show notes, transcripts, and resources to help you build an aligned and successful business too. Don't forget to tell all of your friends that this show is now available to listen to completely free anywhere you can find podcasts, and please leave a rating and review as they really help me get this podcast in front of more like-minded people. Now it's time to get your favorite brew and join me for candid and inspiring conversations around entrepreneurship, mindset, and building a brand and business on your own terms. This is the Scenic Route Podcast.
Okay, let's dig into this wonderful conversation with my dear friend, Rachel Formaro. I feel like I know your relationship with feminism, but we're going to see. So that's where we'll start. And then I want to go into some of your business, your professional story. But first, just tell me your relationship with feminism.
My parents brought me up with the idea that I could do and be anything. And I think those are kind of the earliest ideas around feminism. Once I got into the workforce, I definitely had to confront the fact that things were not quite as I thought they were. I think one of the harder things was even encountering women who were senior to me, also was an eye-opener for me, like kind of realizing that even not all women are feminists was a hard lesson for me when I was starting out. I always say I kind of grew up in the advertising agency world a little later than the Mad Men era, of course, but there was still a lot of like liquid lunches and just the way that I was expected to be the one to get the coffee or tea, just things that kind of naturally fell to the roles of women in that industry at that time. It was an eye-opener. And I think part of that is what informed my journey as an entrepreneur. I spent several years working, as I said, in advertising agencies. It became really clear to me that if I wanted to grow in a role, if I wanted to take the lead on something and make sure that it was my ideas being shared, that I'd have to start something myself. And that's exactly what I did. I started my first company in my early 20s, and a small little creative agency. It was me and one writer and one art director. But I just, from that early on exposure to that world, I realized quickly that if I wanted it to support me in the way that it needed to, I was going to need to kind of step out of the traditional box of that career.
And we'll talk about that in a second. But first, your feminism, I know, is very intersectional. I wonder, was it always?
No, it wasn't always, quite honestly. I mean, I am a white woman in my early 50s, and that's the perspective I was initially coming to it from. It didn't occur to me that it was different for others when it came to feminism. And it wasn't until I started doing the research, even into the suffragette movement, how it wasn't necessarily votes for all women, And so that was a real education point for me. I think also I moved to the United States in early 2001. I grew up in Canada, and I think moving to the US and learning how different people were treated more differently than I'd experienced in Canada as well really opened up my eyes to where we needed to just not focus on women, but all aspects of women. And there are books like Hood Feminism that was a real eye opener for me, and how not all women of color, orientation, abilities were being all lifted up at the same time. It was really white women being lifted up. So it has drastically changed, I would say, in the last 5 years. It's in how I see everybody. I mean, we have a team of often over 50 consultants, and really looking at the whole person. Are you a caregiver? Are you a caregiver for a parent? What do you consider yourself differently able? Kind of seeing that intersectionality across the board has been enlightening and motivating as well.
And I just want to throw in for the Canadian listeners who might be thinking it, to acknowledge, and I know you do as well, that Canada has not been exempt from these issues.
Absolutely not.
A whole host of issues around Indigenous people in Canada that are very much that those issues are coming to light at the same time that America is dealing with a reckoning as well. Okay, let's move into business, because I think these things relate, obviously, because that's what the whole point of the podcast is, right? When I looked up what you did, you mentioned you started something in your 20s, but then you spent a good chunk of your career inside of deeply corporate America, like old rich white guy, corporate America. What made you leave for good and start Blue Pagoda?
Ended up going back into corporate America, and did that for almost 15 years. But I got the itch again. And I think it's interesting that it coincided with becoming a mother. I didn't necessarily know if I was going to be a mom. My husband and I met a bit later in our lives, that we decided to have a child. I wanted to do things differently. I wanted to have, first of all, choice over my own body, which seems weird to talk about in a business framework. But I didn't necessarily want to be told where my body needs to be at any given hour. I wanted, and to me, in my mind, that turned into, I wanted to be there when my daughter would go off to school. I wanted to be there when she got home from school. I wanted to be able to be involved in her life and have those kind of choices. I also wanted to create something different after being in corporate America that long. And it was actually, I was very much inspired. There's an organization called sister.is, and Jennifer Armburst there talks about these 12 principles for prototyping a feminist business. And that so resonated with me. One of the first principles is you have a body. And I was like, okay, there's someone else out there thinking about these things. And that's what caused me to make the jump, is really, it was kind of that question of like, how do I want to live? And it was scary at the same time. The first morning I woke up after not having a full-time paycheck, I was like, what the heck have I done? But I think especially having kind of an entrepreneurial background, my sense of risk is more, I feel more risk putting someone else in control of my destiny than picking up my own control of my destiny.
I think that is something that's very interesting to mull over, because I think that is probably something that women and people of color can really identify with. The less control that you have felt over your body and your life, the more I think that you are willing to say, screw it. I'm willing to take these risks because it's worth it. And I've never felt like I had that control anyway. And I want to feel some sense of control here. I don't know. That's interesting. I totally relate to the body piece, because the time that I finally recognized I could not work for anyone else, like I always knew it and I didn't for all that long. But when I was finally told by a boss that I needed to start reporting when I was going to go to the restroom, I was like, I quit that day. I was like, I mean, no, I can't do that.
I was diagnosed with a general anxiety disorder when I was a child. And part of that is probably I moved around a lot, almost a new school at the beginning of every school year. And I was exhausted by trying to maintain a front of not dealing with that anxiety. I would have especially difficulties in a very crowded conference room. As soon as the door would close, I mean, I would just start sweating right then, thinking, how would I get out of there? You know, it's, if anyone's got panic disorder or anxiety listening to this, you can certainly relate. And and that's also why I wanted to create something different, where there would be room and space for people dealing with similar issues.
I also have anxiety disorder, and I went to 7 different schools by the time I was in 8th, 9th grade. So like, I very much relate to that. That's very interesting. Maybe all of these things tie in. I'd be curious to hear from listeners. Like, do you have these same experiences? Is that why we're all entrepreneurs and founders? I want to ask about your clientele, not like who, but just the what of it, of how are you, the farther you go down your own journey of, and we'll talk about some of the in-between time, but where you're at now, you've done a lot of work around unpacking all of your, all of these things around patriarchy and capitalism, white supremacy, and your business still works with deeply traditionally white male corporate America, and I think this is a question of probably something that you're still in the throes of, and that's okay. Like, I think part of this is talking about the things we're still working through. But how are you, like, how is that internal battle for you around feeling fairly, I think, anti-capitalist, and functioning inside of something very traditionally capitalist? How do you reconcile those things for yourself?
Yes, I have done mental battle with myself, and just to put a finer point on it, our primary clients are found in the financial services industry or the insurance industry, banking. So yes, 100%. A lot of history of white supremacy and pure capitalism happening there. How I have managed it, Becky, is again, kind of rethinking the playbook around how we do business. My goal is twofold. It is to model different opportunities and behaviors to our clients, helping to change the narrative there. Share one quick story. We do a lot of work around language at my company. We took a look at all the kind of typical corporate phraseology, if you will, such as the idea of grandfathering in somebody into a system or platform or pricing, whatever. And one of our consultants, when he was in this client meeting, he paused the meeting and he said, I want to explain to you why we should change that word in how we talk about this project. And he did just that. And the client was very receptive. Like a lot of us, we don't know until we're told about something, and we have an opportunity to learn. And I so appreciated him taking that risk. Not everyone is going to say, like, stop a client, especially who's paying your bill, and say, hey, you're not really using the right word here. But it did make a difference, and it helped to change the narrative of that project. So that's kind of one side of it. The other side of it is really focusing on how we can deliver to our clients more diverse voices on projects and marketing initiatives. We have a really strong focus on recruiting people across all abilities, skin color, orientation, geographic location, phase of life, age, etc., because we've done the research and we believe that having different and more diverse voices leads to better outcomes and decision making. So it's those kind of two levers that I kind of work with to help, I guess, reconcile at the end of the day that, again, we very much are serving a very traditional industry. I like to think of it as a little bit of alchemy happening.
I love that. I want to quickly, just for people who don't know, that grandfathering in phrase is rooted in America's racial history of denying votes to Black people. And so it is one of many words or phrases that we often use without recognizing what that's about. I've been watching a lot of real estate shows lately for some reason, binge watching reality real estate shows. And it's been fun to see that they like that. And that's an area where master bedroom, people didn't realize what that was about. It's about slave master, which is, enslavers. And so that's not a term we want to use. There's so many. And so I love that, like, little things like that, but it also proves that your people feel comfortable to speak up and that there is that trust. And I want to talk a lot about leadership because that's an area where you're a rock star. I mean, you're a rock star at a lot of things, but you are really great at peopling. But I just want to sort of put a finer point on what you said, which is that we all exist within capitalism, right? So we could be anti-capitalist, but we still have to exist within capitalism. We still have to pay bills. You don't get to declare yourself anti-capitalist and then suddenly you don't have to pay the bills. You don't have to, survive in the world. We still have to survive. So as entrepreneurs, what does that look like? We still have to exist within these systems. It means we're going to have to work with clients often that don't reflect exactly the way we want to show up or what business looks like, because none of us can do anti-capitalism perfectly inside of capitalism. And so I love that it's about how do I begin to try to break down these walls from within, and what could that look like? And some of that is that modeling and showing a different way and making little changes where you can, because most of us are not going to be able to take a giant sledgehammer to the wall and suddenly see it all come down. We chip slowly away, each of us chipping our little bit out of that wall of racist, patriarchal capitalism is what eventually leads to it falling. So thank you for that. And that was really the point of that question, because it's not to say, how dare you work with those clients, but how are you reconciling that? Because it's a battle so many of us have to reconcile within. And that is, to me, the approach to do that. Okay. This is a big area and you can focus on what you want, but I have lots of things that I can highlight if they don't come to you naturally. But I want to hear about how you're trying to do things differently. You just mentioned a little bit, but what are the things, like your evolution over this company, which is now more than a decade old? How has that changed for you as you've been going through your own process of learning and unlearning? What's different in the ways that you're running your business now versus a decade ago?
When I started this venture, I wasn't sure from the start, the get-go, if it was just going to be me as a solopreneur or building a team. And even in my corporate role, I definitely am by default kind of a community builder or a team builder. I just have a knack for it and I enjoy it. I like people. So it plays well to that. I think connectedness and empathy are super high and like my Clifton Strengths Finder. That's just kind of how I'm made. And the first year was me on my own. And that was fine, but it got a little lonely, in all honesty. While I was kind of thinking, like, do I bring someone on or do I limit the amount of work that's coming in? The work just started to come in very organically, very word of mouth. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to have like a no jerks allowed policy, and B, to work with people I genuinely care about, and both on the client side and on our team side. And also just to kind of, again, take out some of those pages that like I was done with, like, performance management. That was one of the things that used to make me absolutely crazy in my corporate role, was like, for anyone listening who's been through this, like, you can only have, if you've got a team of 10, you can only have one person who far exceeds. So many people have to be met or whatever. And I'm just like, no, I just, that's not how I want to do business. I want to cultivate a team, again, that, like me, like I started, like, wants to have the flexibility to live their life the way they want to live it, and also make a contribution, also be creative. That's kind of where I started to grow this team, was very much through, first of all, through my own network was how we grew. But one thing I realized, Becky, as part of that process was, again, I am a white woman, and I did not have, one of the first, again, another big lesson for me, I did not have all that diverse network. It takes intention to bring in other voices and to grow your network in different ways. Part of that was engaging in conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and building new connections and building new networks, learning about other people, and kind of bringing them into the fold, if you will, and providing opportunities to grow together. I didn't plan. I wasn't sure what the company was going to look like. And I'm not sure I would have believed you if, we go back to 2014 and you said, well, you're going to have a company with, a company staff plus about 50 or so consultants. It is the most important thing to me is our team. Again, it's in some ways that is a little harder. Like, being an empath, like, I really take my responsibility as someone who is a provider of income and revenue opportunity to others. I take it seriously.
I'm just going to quickly mention other things, and we can come back to them. Perhaps we'll see how much time we have. One, fully remote workforce. That to me is something that is very much aligned with this value system of being able to allow people to work where they are, to reduce all of these issues around professionalism and all of these things. And I think that's important. You're moving to a 4-day work week for your employees. I think that is hugely important. There's a lot around self-care and open communication, open door, those kinds of things that I think are really important. The courageous conversations that you host with that your team host, but where you're creating space for people to really have difficult conversations, to learn and grow together. I think there's a lot you're doing around equitable hiring, bringing in a DEI consultant. So there's a lot of things we can talk about there. But actually, the piece where I think I want to go, in case we don't get to those other things I don't want to miss, is that when we started working together, I can remember you didn't feel comfortable calling yourself a CEO. You didn't see yourself in that way. Despite, as you just said, having what by most of the people who are probably listening to this would say is a pretty big company. It's small by the standards set by, the whoever workforce people. But like, for most people, their companies never get to that size where they actually have staff, full-time paid employees, along with a giant team of consultants. They don't have clients the size of yours. They don't have revenues the size of yours. And to hear you then saying, like, I don't see myself as a CEO. I would love for you to take me back to that. What was it that made you feel that discomfort with that role or that title?
Really, it is what you kind of grow up seeing. Going back to my dad for a little bit, who was a big part of my life, and we lost him in 2022. He was a CEO. My dad would be like out the door at 5:30 in the morning. He would be home, if we're lucky, like maybe 7:30 or so. And he'd often go into the office on the weekends. He later in his life certainly acknowledged the things he missed out on. I guess in my head, I'm like, well, I can't be a CEO. I don't want to be at my desk at 5:30 in the morning. I want to be with my daughter, my husband. I'm not driven. I don't want to be out on the golf course Friday afternoons doing deals. It was like what my idea of a CEO was supposed to be. And never mind the fact that the CEOs that including my dad and others that I observed as a young woman, they all had partners, most often wives, who didn't work full time and were responsible for raising the family and doing all the things. It took me a while to change what I consider to be a CEO. Sometimes I sub out the executive for the empathy, like chief empathy officer, or sometimes it's chief entertainment officer or whatever. It was just really dismantling that idea of what a CEO looks like, sounds like, and how their day is scheduled, and really owning what my version of a CEO is.
Or a feminist executive officer, an FEO, which I also love.
Absolutely. I love that.
What I hear inside that is I don't want to operate the way I have always seen this happen, right? And that is definitely something that's very real. We have only seen a certain thing be modeled. I think it's similar, though, to the idea of changing the system from within. It is this like, how do I chip away at things? Well, one way is I model a new way to be a CEO or an FEO. This is what it can look like. And I feel like that, at least over the years that I've known you for these last 3 or 4 years, that has been such a big part of your journey, is reimagining for yourself and then hopefully for your team and your network and the places beyond you and through this podcast, a different way of showing up as the leader of a company that is, very successful. What has changed for you in the ways that you've approached leadership?
I think one of the biggest things is prioritizing my own self-care. And I think as leaders, some of the narrative has been demonstrate sacrificing yourself for the sake of the company. And I made a conscious choice, and it is a choice, and sometimes it's a daily choice, to not do that. Some of the most endearing messages I get from people that work with us, and especially when they start with us for the first time, is seeing me say, guys, I'm going to be out. I have a therapy appointment, or I'm going to acupuncture, or I'm really sick. I need to take some time off to look after myself. And people are like, I felt like you gave me permission to do the same thing and to look after myself. So again, it kind of goes back to modeling change and being different, and not saying that we have to sacrifice ourselves on this, old white bro playbook altar. In order to be successful, you can still be successful without pushing yourself to the absolute limit. And that's not helping your team either, for them to constantly see the leader of their organization pushing themselves almost into the ground. It's not inspiring. It's not healthy.
You can say whatever you want to your team about your expectations for them taking time off and resting, all these things we always hear in corporate America. Oh, no, we want you to use your PD and all of this. But when we see our boss not leaving the office till 9:00, being the first one in, coming into work sick, never taking their vacation, bragging at the end of the year about how they've, got all these banked vacation days they never took, the message is clear. It doesn't matter what you've told me. And so it's so important that you are modeling that, because I know your heart and I know you genuinely want your consultants and employees to feel that same freedom and to literally say you need to do this. And I know, because I also have an inside look into your business, because I do also coaching with some of your consultants and employees, that they do feel that. And that is rare. And that it is something that feels very different than their experience so many other places.
And the other factor, again, it doesn't mean that we're like being super nice or just for the sake of it. We're still strong and successful. It doesn't, again, there's that kind of narrative that, oh, you take a sick day or take lunch, you're weak, right? I mean, especially some of us, I think it was Wall Street, the movie back in the 80s or whatever, lunch is for wimps or something. But when we take care of ourselves and are operating at our best, we do our best work. We are more efficient. I don't like the word productive, but we get the work done that needs to be done, and we do it in a amazing and wonderful ways. And so and that's where we're kind of changing that client narrative as well. Like our clients are learning to appreciate the idea of taking care of yourself, and you get the best from yourself and from your community when you take care of yourself.
And retention. Your people don't want to leave. Even the people who are like, I could probably use more hours, right? These are consultants. So some people, maybe they want more hours, or maybe they have thought about like, the so-called security of a 9 to 5, although we know that how actually secure that really is. But, even those people, there is this like, but I don't want to, I don't think I can ever find this experience again. I don't want to leave. It helps with retention, which is huge because turnover is expensive. So yes, there are the like feel good reasons to do it, but that doesn't mean that it can't also have very strong business reasons to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, a lot of when I talk to a prospective client, they are often surprised that some of our consultants have been with us for 8 years, and we're a 10-year-old company. It is a lot of continuity. And also when we work with a client, they tend to stay with us for the long haul. And so it leads to repeat business. We get to understand the clients better because we're spending more time with them. We're getting to know them. We're helping them with their initiatives. It ends up resulting in a positive experience for everybody around the table.
And I think a portion of that has to fall back onto you to say, I think so much of it is you also understanding, speaking earlier, like you did, of your strengths, Clifton strengths, something I'm very familiar with and excited about, understanding your strengths and playing into those. And for you, that is the people part. That isn't the case for everyone, right? So understanding those things is really important because that's also what helps to create those relationships, because it is what you do well. And the more that you have been able to allow yourself to work into your zone of genius and let go of the other pieces, because your zone of genius is in people, both in managing, finding clients, managing your team, those kinds of things. All the other stuff is outside of that zone of genius. But that is the zone of genius, is that part that only you can do with the magic that you do it with. And the more that you have allowed yourself, I think, to play into that and let go of the rest. And that to me is part of what it means to be a CEO. When we talk about what is that CEO, it is saying, this is where I reside. This is where I best serve this company. And I can let the other stuff go and trust others to do the other things. But that was a process. It has been and probably continues to be a process for you. What has that been like for you?
I love to receive kind words about what I've done, and thank you. But let me also say that I learn from really great people. I also have had a knack for knowing when I don't have a problem asking for help. Becky, like as you said earlier, you and I have been working together, and your outside view and insights have helped me around the whole kind of zone of competence versus zone of genius. Especially as an entrepreneur, like you do wear so many hats. And you get used to it. You often do need someone else to say, should you really be, stuffing your own holiday cards out to your clients? Surrounding yourself with the experts, because even though as entrepreneurs we think we're supposed to know everything, it's not possible. Bringing in those experts to help both me as a leader and my team has made a massive difference to how we work. Even the idea, the very bold idea of bringing on, what a company coach, the work that you do with us, Becky. And let me be clear, it's not a kind of a drink the Kool-Aid kind of coaching thing. It's not about our company. It's about those individuals and the coaching that they receive to help them grow and deal with challenges and learn. Same with DEI. Like, not for a second was I going to assume that I was just going to Google DEI and get it figured out. I brought on an amazing expert, and a woman who has a completely different perspective than I do. And it was magical. It was pure magic, to be working with her.
Forget the outdated notion of the guy on the golf cart who's never even in his office and doesn't know his employees' names. What I think a CEO is that person who holds the vision and then who knows how to make it happen. It doesn't mean they do it all. That's being that you're just a worker bee, right? But it's that person who says, I can hold the vision. I know what's possible. I know where we're going, where I want us to go. And then I know how do I get the right people in the right seats to do the right work, right? That is that understanding of what are my strengths? What is my zone of genius? What is the strengths of the people around me? Because we've done strengths work with your team as well, and understanding who can do these things and then making sure that is what happens with the ultimate goal of, yes, freeing up some of your time so that you can care for yourself to continue to serve in that role. Because I think we live in this capitalist world that has, and oddly, for many of us, made us think that role doesn't have merit because it's not about production, right? It's not, I'm the person who's doing the work that creates the billable hours that pays for the company. So it doesn't have the merit unless I'm doing that. If I can't tie my work directly to this invoice, then I'm not doing anything, which is strange because, it's also a role that we elevate when it's a white man, but anyone else would sort of like, oh no, I need to be doing the work. But that work is so important and is hard. It's hard work to hold a vision. It is hard work to keep people excited about a vision. It is hard work to implement a vision, to find the right people, to keep everyone excited. All of that. That's hard work. And you have to be able to care for yourself. So let's talk about self-care and rest, because I think that was maybe one of two reasons that I, anyway, from my perspective, think that you decided to make some investment in coaching. One being, I want to have more time for me. I know that I can't sustain this the way it is. And two being some things around legacy and philanthropy and giving. So we'll talk about that separately. But talk to me about self-care and rest. What's changed for you over time with that? And maybe where do you still want to go?
Me about 15 years ago would feel, or even 10 years ago, would feel uncomfortable just enjoying sitting reading a magazine or a book. Always in the back of my head was this idea is you have to be doing something. You have to be pushing something forward. You have to be productive. And if you're not, then what are you doing? So it has taken me a long time to be okay with just being and not doing. I am much more comfortable now unplugging, taking off my watch, going on do not disturb, and just, even just sitting in my backyard. I mean, and looking at trees, like an older version of me would have been like, what? Like, you got a shit ton to do and you're sitting looking at trees. But it is nourishing. And part of the opportunity of being a human is to find ways to be nourished and to nourish. So I really have reframed the idea around what does it mean to rest? What does it mean to do self-care? I think it may be 2.5 years ago, I decided to do two things. A steady practice of Pilates. It's my thing. I finally found my thing, that and dancing. And it doesn't feel like punishment. It is a wonderful group, not 5 minutes from my house. So it kind of works. It gets me out of my house, which I enjoy. And I also decided to make healthy choices around what I'm eating, and I respond well to acupuncture, and that is a part of how I look after myself. And my husband and I are really into Formula One. I blame Netflix and the Drive to Survive, but I have just gotten hooked on it. And on race weekends, it's like we have a latte and we sit in our PJs and we watch the race. And it's quality time for us together, and just a different perspective, seeing other people challenges and how they deal with it, and thinking what strategy they're using for their pit stops. I mean, it sounds a little nerdy, but it's just, again, it's been kind of different ways of even thinking about what is rest and self-care. Reading Rest, was it the Rest Manifesto?
Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hersey.
Yes, Trisha Hersey. That one was yet another eye opener by an amazing writer.
Yeah, and I think a big piece of it that you didn't mention, but I think is really important, is the scheduling of it, of prioritizing the time off, because when we don't, it doesn't happen. And that has been a change that you've been making and you've done it in pieces, right? You didn't go all in and say, I'm going to take this entire day off or whatever. I think at first it was like, I'm going to try and take a couple of hours every Friday. And it has grown over time to create this protected time for you, which is really important.
Yeah. And I also want to add to that, that we often have assumptions about the time that others need from us. So I used to have an assumption that everyone on my team needed to have a dedicated half hour with me every week. And with the size of our team now, that is impossible. Like, I was trying to do it and I was doing nothing else but that. And as the CEO, like, I'm doing new business development, and that needs to happen. And so my old thinking was, again, it was that assumption that everyone needs that time. But when I reached out to my team and I said, hey, I want to be here for you. What does that look like? And for some people, it's like, oh, is it okay if I text you if I need something? Or, maybe we check in like once a month, or can we do a group call? And so now, instead of having all those individual one-on-ones, I have 2 open office hours a week. I have one on Monday and one on Thursday. And everyone has it on their calendar. And I can handle about 5 people per hour, for just a quick check-in. Or is there a challenge that you have that you need help with? Has something come up on the home front that we need to work around? So now there's that time where people know that they can get on my list, my check-in list, and I just go through my list on Monday and Thursday to check in with people. And so, again, it's like questioning our assumptions about what we think even other people need.
Before I get to the piece around legacy, I just want to ask, because you mentioned something earlier, and this kind of makes me think of it again, and it's something that has come up with other clients that have people that they pay, which is that feeling responsible for other people's financial stability and their security, as somebody who's paying people's livelihood, right? And this is something I've seen so often in people who have deep empathy, and you have that very high on your strengths. It's what makes you an excellent people person, and work great with clients and work great with your employees, but also can make it really painful, I have noticed, for many people who employ others around those difficult decisions, because there are economic realities about paying people and those kinds of things. So how do you manage that? How do you deal with that when you have these times, these ebbs and flows, and currently some ebbs where you're having to make some of these harder decisions? How do you manage that in a way that still allows you to feel okay? Or how do you deal with the difficult feelings of having to know that sometimes you can't deliver on someone's, livelihood anymore?
First of all, it was for me to acknowledge that we're in a project-based business, and projects, if they go well, come to a natural conclusion. That's good. But I still kind of go through that kind of almost like, grieving process a little bit at the end of a project. And we have checklists now that we use for ends of projects, like kind of acknowledging the successes, what worked, what didn't work, all that kind of stuff. And just kind of making a container for it for the end of a project has been helpful. And then engaging in reflection as well. When we have a consultant who wraps up a project, I I ask them to take some time to decompress from it. Tell me, what did you love doing during this project? What did you really dislike doing? And then let's figure out how to pivot more towards that love list for the next project engagement. So that's kind of one area. Of course, in this current market, it has been probably one of the most challenging times for us in our business cycle, especially because we grew a lot during the pandemic. I think part of that was, as you mentioned, we did start as a virtual company, again, wanting to have that kind of accessibility for people to be able to work from where they feel most comfortable, and often that's from home. And so now we're experiencing a contraction period. The economy is going through its contraction changes. Our clients have been experiencing contraction where they are doing layoffs. We look at people as humans, and that is sometimes painful because we see people, our friends, coworkers, being let go from a job that they really cared about. Budget cuts are a reality. It's something we're dealing with right now. Today, I have a couple of people that I need to let know that their projects are going to be ending early. But the way we handle this is I don't want anyone to feel abandoned. Like that's where we're in this together. And I think it's that togetherness that kind of raises us up and helping one another. Honoring with action, which is something that I've done in volunteer roles. I was a local group leader for Moms Demand Action here in Des Moines. And honor with action is a philosophy that we often helped to motivate us during difficult times. When we found out that one of our clients was making a large layoff a few weeks ago, one of my first thoughts was, well, we recently did we do mentoring circles at our company where all of our consultants can get together and we go on a topic and we kind of do a group mentoring, basically, like sharing best practices, experiences, ideas. And we did one on resume. We did a resume workshop. And I said to the team, like, what if we took that resume workshop and we did it again, put it on LinkedIn, and anyone who wanted to join us could. And again, it was like everyone was like, oh, that feels good. We're going to help people. And so even in a down market and when things feel like they're contracting, finding ways to be of service and to help everybody, it lifts your spirits to be helping others, and it helps with perspective as well. But it is hard. I'm not going to kind of brush it under the carpet that I've had a few sleepless nights. And again, I think that's part of what I signed up for with the role that I'm in.
Yeah, because we can't run a human first business and lose our humanity.
Yeah, the number of people have said to me, like, Rachel, they're just contractors. They're just contractors. What are you worried about? They knew what they're getting into. And not for a second do I think about that way. Of course, legally, they are contractors, but they're human beings. And so I can't but help be committed to helping them find what's next and being supportive and 100% human first.
It's a yes and. It's yes, I want to care about them and it's going to hurt. I don't get to have it both ways. I don't get to say I'm going to run my business differently and not just treat my employees like numbers. And then when that's hard, say, well, now they're just numbers. No, they're still humans. And if I want to have humanity in my business, that means I'm going to have to deal with human feelings, which means sometimes they're going to be upset. Sometimes I'm going to be upset. It's like having a child in a way, like you're signing up for a lot of pain, right? Because you're going to have to witness your children being hurt. You're going to have to know you can't always take care of them. You can't always help them. And you still do it, right? Because you love them. And that's the same with our businesses when we want to run human first businesses. So I love that. Thank you. And we're running low on time. So I want to make sure I have time to ask a couple other things, namely around legacy, because I feel like that was a big part of what also brought you into coaching and rethinking your business. You had reached this kind of place of thinking, I want my business and my work to be about more than just today and paying the bills. And I remember in the same way that you felt really uncomfortable with the idea of calling yourself a CEO, you had some similar discomfort around this idea of thinking of yourself as like a philanthropist. That's supposed to only be for the, Rockefellers of the world and not like, who am I to say that? But it was really rooted in, I want to give back. I want to leave a legacy. I want to do things outside of this. So how's that shifted for you?
Well, one of the biggest benefits from looking at my calendar, getting my schedule under control, and protecting my schedule, making boundaries, is that I am able to dedicate time as a philanthropist and as someone who volunteers. I was delighted to be asked to join the board of the Feminist Foundation for women and girls here in central Iowa. To be able to engage in that work and also the vision and legacy of that work position, we did a visioning session, an all-day session at Chrysalis about a month ago or so, and it was just amazing to be able to participate in the discussion of what do girls and women really need looking ahead for the next 10 years. And so it was just such a privilege and honor to be able to do that. And that's where I want to be eventually. Like, part of my plan is to further step back from the day-to-day operations of the company and to really be involved more actively in our community, both locally and nationally, but also encoding giving in the DNA of our company. We have Giving Tuesday every month. When someone refers a consultant to us among the consultant team or employee team, we make a donation on their behalf to an organization that they care about. We just look at different opportunities to make it, again, a normal part of business, is that giving element, and being seen and recognized for that is important to us.
This is sort of related, just because one of the things that I think that we both experience and talk a lot about outside of like our professional relationship is aging, because we are both entering what is sort of the last act of our professional careers. Not the last act of our lives, by golly, but we are, on that other side of where we're now sort of the wise old crones in the professional world. And I'm just wondering for you, like, what is all that? Like, where are you at with that, with the aging process personally, how it relates to you professionally? Just because I think it's something else that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it is part of our experience as business owners, even if it's tangential.
It is. And this, for me, has been front and center for the last few years, especially around menopause. I have never heard the word menopause in a corporate environment. And we talk about it at our company. We allow for it. Again, I have had conversations with other women founders and coworkers of mine who are women of a certain age, where one of the things we love about working from home is I get to change out of a heavier layer into a tank top if I need to. I mean, it's no joke. Some of what we deal with as women, to be able to acknowledge it and take the shame away from it is so important. We've got to stop kind of brushing that aside. And so that has been a big part of my conversations lately in some of the circles that I'm in, is how to normalize aging in our business environment, in our business life, in our professional lives. Even, the different choices that we have. I decided to go natural with my hair. Conveniently for me, just before the pandemic, I decided I was not going to color my hair anymore. And in some cases, does it occur to me that, because I look older, I might not get this business deal? It does occur to me. Absolutely. I hope that that's not the case. Fortunately, our close rate is really good. It's something that occurs to me that I'm not sure my male counterparts need to necessarily think about. Also, recognizing that older people, olders, I learned that term. There's a great book called This Chair Rocks. People have value at all stages of life. And it goes both ways as well. Like, maybe I have sometimes been judgy of people who are younger and how they do things. So it does go both ways. But I think as well, part of why I love leading this company is opportunities for people who may be already counted out as from their years of being able to contribute. We have a number of folks who have done like the meat of their career, if you will, and are now kind of picking and choosing projects to really contribute and engage in. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of these folks would have a harder time getting full-time jobs at a corporate company because they're going to take a look at their age and decide for themselves that they're not going to have the right skill set, which unfortunately leaves a lot of people who can really make amazing contributions on the sidelines.
Like you said, it doesn't get talked about enough. Just all of the aspects of that experience of aging, and uniquely for women, because yes, men age, but I think we just all know that's a very different experience as far as what it means for their careers and how they're perceived. And that question of, will they hire me? That is there, but I definitely think it's much more delayed than it happens for women. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And I was at a meeting with actually my financial advisor. We usually meet on Zoom, but it was a rare occasion where I didn't have back-to-back meetings. And I had a hot flash in the meeting with him. And fortunately, there were like a stack of postcards for an event. And I had to pick one up and start waving myself. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm having a hot flash in here. And just to even say it, like I wasn't just going to pretend that nothing was wrong, right? It was clearly I was experiencing something. So again, we just changing the narrative around what it means to be going through that phase of life as a woman.
I want to share that the book is called This Chair Rocks by Ashton Applewhite. I looked it up. And so we'll call that your resource. I always ask people to share one. So I think that's a lovely one. And I also always ask for a nonprofit that you support, but you've already mentioned that, which is the Chrysalis Foundation in Des Moines, Iowa, which is doing great work that you've already outlined. So I'm going to make a donation to them to thank you for your time for being here and ask everyone to do the same. I really am thrilled to have you here, not just because I love you and because we've worked together and have spent a lot of time in other spaces together, but because I really want people to see that you can do it differently and be successful. I think a lot of the folks I've had have maybe had smaller businesses, maybe they're solopreneurs, or, there's also people who had very large businesses, but like you can make changes that honor yourself, that allow you to run a people first business, to treat people with dignity and respect, to create a really diverse team, all the things that you've done, and still have a successful business that's paying for your life, that's, allowed you to buy a new home and to pour back into your employees and to take some vacations and to have time for those things, to be able to spend time with your child and all of that. It is possible. I think a lot of people do feel a little bit of this like, well, that's a nice thought, but that's not real, right? And I want people to know that it is real. You are, to me, just such an example of what it can look like in practice. So thank you for sharing and letting people see that that's possible, because I think it's so important.
Thank you very much.
Some of the things we didn't get to is talking about tarot and being a little woo-woo in the business world, because I know that's important to you, but we don't have time for that. And we also didn't talk about working with your husband, because you guys work together in this company. Are either of those things you'd like to share 3 tips around for our bonus content?
We talked about a lot about the whole person in business when we look at it. And I do have a woo-woo side. I consult my astrology every Sunday to see what the week ahead is looking like.
You think there's 3 tips you can share inside of how to be woo-woo and still be professional?
Yes.
Well, then that's going to be our bonus content. Before we wrap up, I want people to know that if you want to hear that bonus content about how to incorporate your woo-woo feelings and allow for that inside of a professional experience, then make sure you subscribe to the Feminist Founders newsletter. The information, as always, is in the show notes. I also shared it at the top of the show, how to go and subscribe. And I want to say thank you for listening and thank you for being here, Rachel.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Feminist Founders podcast. If you like what you heard and want to learn more, or if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing with the show, please visit feministfounderspodcast.com. There you can find out about becoming a paid subscriber for as little as the price of 1 cup of coffee a month, which will directly support my work. You can also find the show notes and find the bookshop.org website where you can order any of the books mentioned in this or any episode, which will also support the work I'm doing. The link to all of that is in the show notes. Thanks again, and I can't wait for our next episode.